Hello, and welcome to the Brubacher Excavating Podcast, where we're shaping the world we live in so more people can find the construction industry uncommonly refreshing.
Hello, and welcome to the Brubacher Beyond podcast, where we are shaping the world we live in so that more people can find the construction industry uncommonly refreshing. My name is Macy Landis, your host for this episode, where we'll be discussing recruiting and hiring in the construction industry. Our world has seen some challenges in the workforce over recent years, and the construction industry has also been affected by this as a result. So with that being said, we're here today to talk about why this has happened and what we as an industry can do to overcome this. Joining me today from Brubacher is Allan and Torey Shotzberger, as well as external guests Sean Cotter from Warfel and Gina Breslin from North Group. So if you guys want to go around and give a brief introduction about yourself, what you do, your position, I guess we can start with Sean.
Great. Sean Cotter. I'm the Vice President of Pre-Con and Estimating for Warfel Construction. Been in the construction industry most of my life, so started framing and concrete crews for my family's company when I was young and kind of worked my way into commercial construction. Started as an estimator and then worked my way up through the ranks at Warfel to the Vice President of Pre-Con.
Awesome. Allan?
Yeah, Allan Day, Director of Estimating and Project Management here at Brubacher. I've been with the company for going on 17 years now, and just privileged to have a great team to work alongside of and serve here.
Gina?
Sure. Gina Breslin with North Group Consultants and lead our hiring services at North Group. So I think that's probably why I'm here today. But this is a great topic and it'll be fun to walk through. Been with North Group 13 years and describe my journey at North Group as growing up, kind of in the business and related industries as a kid, growing up in family business. So looking forward to our conversation.
Great. Thanks. Torey?
Torey Shotzberger. I'm the recruiter here for Brubacher. I've been in the position since March of this year, so I'm still pretty new, but I've learned quite a bit the past half year or whatever it's been. Before that, I was the construction administrative assistant with Brubacher, so I've been in the industry a little over a year and a half, still learning and excited to keep trucking forward.
Awesome. All right, so do you guys want to give a brief background of our relationships? Obviously, Gina said she's here from North Group, and we do a lot of work with you guys. I'm not sure, Warfel, do you guys also work with North Group at all?
We do. So we've had a long-standing relationship with North Group and do a lot of our recruiting and hiring and executive coaching and some other stuff. So we've been working with North Group as long as I've been at Warfel.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. And it was interesting for today. I looked back and I'm like, when did we technically start working with Brubacher? Because we've known Brubacher for a really long time. Maybe not quite as long as Warfel, but almost. Formally, our work started in 2020, but the relationships go way back.
Right.
And I mentioned that at North Group, I work in our hiring services, but we do a lot around organizational health. Sean mentioned executive coaching. So really helping leaders and organizations reach their highest potential. And so that work continues with Brubacher as well. And it's just our ideal client are organizations and leaders who are really good and just want to become better. And Warfel and Brubacher totally check that box.
Awesome. Thanks. And between Warfel and Brubacher, do you want to give a little bit of background about our relationship at all?
Sure. So we have not worked a lot together in recent history, and I think we're working on changing that and just trying to find the right projects to team up on together.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, as our groups have worked in and around each other, our leadership teams have kind of talked through and said that, there's a lot from, values that align with Brubacher. And so we've made a real conscious effort, I think both organizations, to find the right projects to work together, because I think both organizations have, like I said, the same values and really, I think, could work well together. So we're looking for those opportunities as they come up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks so much for joining us again. We're grateful I'll be here and chat about this. So as a whole, in terms of recruiting and hiring, what qualities do you guys think are important to succeed in the construction industry, not just specific to our companies, but just as a whole?
I would have to say lifestyle. Being in the construction industry, it's very important that you are able to handle the long hours, like with your family, you got to communicate that, especially like these young folks that are coming in, starting young families. It's definitely a lifestyle. You have to want to work hard, be punctual, all that kind of stuff. So I would have to say lifestyle is something very important to be in the construction industry.
Yeah, definitely. That is a very good point. It's a very different, long days, long hours in the winter months, especially in the weather. So yeah, that is definitely a good one.
I would jump in there and say though that I think construction, whether it's excavating or actually building the buildings, has something that a lot of other industries maybe don't have, something that's really cool, and that is you can see the tangible result of your work. So why would you wrestle with work-life balance? Why would you work those long days when you need to? It's because you can see the result.
Right.
So if you're somebody who has that tenacious spirit, that can-do spirit, that get it done mindset, and loves to see a finished product, then construction might be a great fit for you. When I think of Brubacher and Warfel.
Yeah. I think everything you guys said is exactly correct. Is these, it's not an industry for someone who's just trying to skate by. I mean, it's long hours, it's hard work, but it also, with the tangible results, there's also the relationships that come into it. That, one of the things I didn't quite realize as I got into commercial is it's really important that the office and the field work well together, and you have to have those relationships. That estimating and operations work together. There's a natural tension there. So where you can sometimes just put your head down and build a widget, and a lot of things could think about, well, construction, you're just building the building, you can do that. I think understanding that those relationships inside and outside the organization are so important. And it's probably been the thing that I see the most difficult for people to realize is like, hey, I love to just build things. Well, you also have to make sure that the field is going to get along with the office, and you have to make sure that you're getting along with your trade partners, and they're getting along with you, and that everybody has this symbiotic relationship to get the building done, because it is a complicated thing to get, whether it's civil or buildings or whatever it is. It takes a long time. It's a long-standing relationship, a year long, where other companies can get things done quicker.
I've used the analogy of puzzle pieces a lot and a variety of different descriptions for things here, but I feel like I've never, until I was in the construction industry, I didn't realize, every workplace is a puzzle, that you can't complete that picture without every single puzzle piece. But construction is just takes it to the next level, because whether it's, your small tools or people behind the scenes, people in the office, estimating, operations, out in the field, everybody has to work together to really make it happen and make that picture display as it should.
And then you got to deal with the uncontrollable elements like the weather, right? So that, so there comes that can-do spirit. The tension that Sean brought up between office and field is something that's very real. And so at North Group, we talk a lot about the importance of organizational health. And boy, if I could encourage someone in this industry to be intentional about anything, that would be it. Make sure you're creating that relationship so that it's not the office versus the field, right? What's most important to this organization, and how do we communicate that out to the rest, like the whole way throughout the organization, so everyone knows this is a goal, this is what we're working for. Oh, and here's the Brubacher way, or here's the Warfel way. This is how we do it. Back to some of those characteristics that you mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. And for them to out in the field to know that like we have their back, and
absolutely,
we all got to work together to make it happen. So with that being said, do we look for any qualities that may be different than those as a construction whole? The lifestyle and whatnot, but maybe more so onto as our values, our core values, and do we look for anything different than the status quo as far as qualities go?
Yeah, I think stress management, which goes to core values, is how do you deal with, this is a stressful business, it's a risky business. You have people coming out of college who are just learning how to balance their checkbook, and you're asking them to deal with millions of dollars. And I mean, it's every day. I have to remind the estimating, the pre-con team, that these aren't poker chips. When it's you deal with $1 million or 100,000, it starts to get like it doesn't mean anything, and it means a lot. So I look for people, because under stress, you'll see people's values erode. So you look for those people who can handle the stress, who can decouple from the work to life, to go be home, be with your family, come back to work, make sure you're not taking all that, because that stress really quickly, when I've seen things go wrong, it's when people can't deal with the stress of those kind of decisions. And when they do, that's when things start, like honest integrity, which are some of our values, they start to people question, and those are things you can't have happen. So I really look for people who can deal with those stressful situations and try to put them into it very quickly when they come on board to see how they are. And it doesn't mean you just throw them out, but you deal with that and you try to teach them, because it's really important that people learn how to deal with stress. This is a risky, stressful business.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I liked how you also mentioned honesty and integrity as well, because those definitely play a big part in that, especially once you get stressed. Like, you still got to be able to do the right thing and be honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think something else that we've really been working on here at Brubacher, and Torey can probably speak to this better than me, is just focusing on the culture aspect when you are recruiting, and not as much on the skill. Skill is important for some roles, not necessarily for every role, but we've been doing a lot of kind of hire for character, train for skill for some of our more entry level positions. And I will hire somebody all day long who fits in well with the team. In fact, there are certain positions where we have a peer interview of sorts too, where I want to make sure that they're going to get along well with the team before we bring them on board. And we've had some situations where that hasn't gone as well, and we skip that step or kind of ignore the writing on the wall, so to speak. And sometimes there's some tough lessons learned there. But I think really just focusing on that culture and making sure that you're not going to hire someone who's going to erode from that culture or from the core values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I think of both Warfel and Brubacher too, Warfel very specifically uses a phrase to describe a characteristic, but it's run towards adversity. With Brubacher, you don't maybe phrase it that way, but there's this idea of we need to be honest, we need to be straightforward. And when things are going sideways, you got to own up and you got to do it right now. Or it could be a mistake that has a big price tag to it, or maybe it's it could be a safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about hiring, how do we, look for that characteristic as well? Because for both your cultures, that's pretty important.
Yeah, we do something similar. So we do a cultural assessment where a hiring manager will bring somebody in, but they're actually culturally assessed by people they will work with every single day. So the hiring manager, no vice presidents, no directors, no one sits in those. It's estimators and project managers and PAs and PEs, and all sit down. And it's not about their skill set. It's about who they are and talking through that. And if one person decides that they're not a cultural fit, we don't hire them, which I can tell you as a hiring manager is extremely frustrating sometimes. And you really want to say, hey, this is not what I want to continue to do because I need somebody in a seat to do the work. But we've made a real commitment to it. And I think it's really paid dividends in the end to say, like, hey, we're going to look at culture. And the hiring manager gets to decide whether or not they have the skill set to do it. But the people that work with these individuals every day have to make that decision. And being committed to that is very difficult. And like it's, you sometimes, like I said, you just want to say like, hey, I just need the person. So they've got to go through this. And we've lost people because it takes a while and they're, they're being made offers all over the place. And so they've said, hey, this took too long. So, but we've really committed to it. And I think in the end, it's the absolute right decision.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
And to your point, I mean, that's difficult. Like essentially you're giving those folks veto power.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, someone can walk through your whole process, and then if they don't make it through that step. On the flip side, though, we've all done that. I think once they're here, once they're in our company or once they're in our environment, they'll change, or we'll be able to teach this characteristic to Allan's point, we can teach the skills. Let's hire for the right characteristics.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that stuck out to me and I will absolutely never forget is I feel like so many people in today's world, so many businesses are, hiring for the skill and they need you to have XYZ degree or this many years in the practice. And if you have that character, you can teach somebody the skill, but it can't be the other way around. And I think that's something that others can really learn from, that it's not always about the paper, the degree, the 3 or 4 years that they have. Obviously it's helpful, but I don't think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, at North Group, we would make a distinction too between a person's character. So when I think of that, I think about integrity, honesty, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're hiring for different positions, we would narrow it down and say, what are the top 3, 4, maybe 5 if you twist my arm, but what are the most important characteristics? So same thing, we would put the experiences, so the degree, where they've been at the bottom of the list, the skills, what is it that we need them to do every day, kind of in second place. But then in first place, what's most important are those characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be tenacity. It could be that can-do spirit, some of the things I mentioned earlier. But if it's an estimator, accuracy is probably something that rises to the top.
Hopefully.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
right? And so each organization, you would want your characteristics to tie into your culture, but I also think the characteristics are going to vary dependent on the role.
Mhm.
So the idea of knowing who is it that we're setting out to hire can really help you throughout the whole process.
I think it's a great point. I think back through my career, and I think some of the most qualified individuals that have been in the department I've worked in have also been the laziest or the least willing to spend the extra time to do it. So just because the knowledge and experience is in your head doesn't mean you can apply that to a day-to-day operations. And that's where I've really seen that degrees are great and experience is awesome, and you need that in order to succeed. But the people I've seen succeed the most are people that are a willingness to learn, that come in, have that can-do, go-get-it attitude, that took the time to develop into really, really great pre-con managers, estimators, whatever it is, because some of those people that were really, really good and qualified knew it and acted like it and didn't end up being the kind of person that really succeeded.
So why do we think that these qualities or why do we value these qualities so highly? And how do they play into our daily business? What do they do for us that helps our team operate more efficiently?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about characteristics, you really need to understand, I used the phrase earlier, like the Warfel way or the Brubacher way. Like, what is it that we value as an organization? Both these companies, Warfel and Brubacher, have core values that help to guide that. And so construction in general, yes, some of these are almost maybe permission to play. Like if you don't have that get it done spirit, then I don't know, maybe construction's not even right for you. Right? I mean, that's construction. But for each, as we think about our own organizations, even North Group, like one of our core values is instilling hope. If you're not a hopeful person, if you don't come, with an optimistic spirit, I'm going to steal a phrase from a friend of mine, but you're going to feel like, and you're going to look like a cactus in a swamp. Like it just doesn't quite, right? It just doesn't fit. So I think we have to reflect as an organization and understand, what is it that we value, and that can then influence how we move forward in terms of hiring right fit folks.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good point.
Yeah, I think as well that your company has to really embody the qualities that you sell, or it comes off as a cactus in a swamp, or more, it comes off fake.
Mm-hmm.
And if your leadership got together one day and said, hey, we need a value statement or a motto because that's what companies do, and you put it on a piece of paper and it's a buzzword and you don't really live it and people don't see you do it. So I think it's so important that companies' heart and soul and what we call culture needs to really be shown from top to bottom every single day, because if not, people are smart, and you hire smart people and they're going to ferret out pretty quickly that like those are just words on a piece of paper you hung on your wall.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way I see the ownership act. That's not the way I see leadership act. That's not the way they're holding me accountable. So again, it's going back to the why is it so important? Because that's what your clients see. That's what your employees are going to feel. And if you don't, they're going to go find somewhere else to work. And so making sure those values really, really are at the heart of what you want to accomplish, and then really almost to a nauseum pounding it. We say clients for life. And sometimes people say, man, that is on everything. And I said, because it is everything. And we put it on everything. And we say it at the beginning of every meeting, because that's how important it is to us. And if you ever see me not living that way, I want you to tell me.
Right.
And that's important, that they feel empowered to come say, hey, I don't think that was the right decision. So I think it's so important, because it's what you are really at the end of the day. Is as companies, we're people. And so if your people aren't acting that way, then you're going to be in trouble and out of business pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important too, having, like, if you do instill those core values, having current employees, by living out those core values, will help with the new people coming in, making sure that, they're meeting expectations, and everyone's meeting expectations all around.
Right.
So by living out as a company those core values, it trickles down.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we would say your culture is a combination of three different things. So first of all, it's what you celebrate. So when we see somebody like at North Group who's instilling hope, are we celebrating that? At Warfel, when you see someone who's running towards adversity, making that running to the fire, making that difficult decision, owning up to a mistake, whatever that looks like, are we celebrating it? Brubacher would have examples of that too. Like, how do we celebrate what we want repeated in our organization? And then our culture is also a bit of what we tolerate or what we allow. And that's where we need to, make sure we're having accountabilities and structure in place, because like Sean said, you can have that nice saying on the wall, but if there's a certain group of people or a certain individual in a key position that's allowed to do the exact opposite of that or constantly stray from that, well, then you're not serious about that value. It doesn't mean anything, and people will figure that out.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the accountability portion is also so important, and to be able to, like, from any level, field, office, higher up, whatever you are, to be able to be vulnerable and allow someone to come to you and say, hey, I don't think that you're actually like living out, or what you did just then, I don't think that you're living out, what you say you want to. And to be able to accept that and learn from it is huge.
It's difficult, right? It's easy to tell somebody, hey, you didn't, I don't know, help me out, Allan, excavate something correctly, right? You didn't, that's easy. It's kind of black and white. Or, you look at something in estimating, you didn't add those numbers up correctly, and now we have a problem. But when you look at somebody and you're talking about their behavior, that gets personal. So it's difficult. It's difficult to do. But if you create that culture where we are going to have those conversations in a really healthy way, Lencioni describes it as having healthy conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to be able to have those conversations and take that, not criticism, but take that
feedback
would be a better word. Yeah, for sure. So do we think that the qualities that we've all been talking about, they're all wonderful and fit in so well? Do they differ at all between the office and the field, other than the typical, clearly it's a completely different line of work, or not line of work, but what you're
Work
actually doing on work environment, and the things that you're doing, here in the office, we're doing a lot more paperwork than they're doing out in the field, obviously, but those values, core values, how do they differ at all between the two, or do they not?
I don't think core values differ at all from the field to the office. I think, like I said, if they do differ, you're going to have a really tough situation on your hands where when they do interact, they're going to feel, whichever side is going to look at it and say there's a double standard for the office versus the field. So I think from a core value standpoint, I would say they don't differ at all. From a day-to-day operational standpoint, they differ immensely. And I think, what we've tried to do, and what I've tried to do with some of the leadership training that we do, is have people have a healthy respect for the other side of the table. Have a respect for an individual who gets up in their car at 3:30 in the morning and drives 4 hours to a site and does that every single day and comes home and is out there in the cold and everything. But also have that person say, do you want to fill out the amount of paperwork? Do you want to take on the stress of estimating, which is essentially in some cases, putting budgets together with very little information? That's a high stress too. It's different, but it's very stressful to try to say, hey, I think that building's going to be $25 million, and then have to go talk to the owner when it's 26 because something changed. Well, $1 million is a big deal. So having those people have a mutual respect, but at the end of the day, the core values have to stay the same.
Yeah, I would echo what Sean said. I think core values cannot change, right? And we talk different times about the difference between a priority and a value, and especially as it relates to safety. And sometimes you say priorities change depending on what's going on, and you got to make sure that something like a value, specifically safety, but also with the other core values that each of our companies embody, the core values got to stay a core value, and we got to make sure that doesn't undermine the culture that we're striving for. But yeah, as far as differences in characteristics that help you be successful in the office versus the field, I think flexibility, is probably more important maybe in the field than it is in the office. Things can change at a moment's notice sometimes in the field, especially in the civil underground world, where you hit something that you didn't know was there, and now you got to stay up till midnight tonight to make sure that it's safe before you go home, or whatever it may be. And so, and Jen talked a little bit too about just having to drive farther away as opposed to coming to an office every day. But there's also what's physically tiring, what's mentally tiring, things like that. just so many different things that go into that.
Yeah, I think too about just having the idea of having people work in their area of strength. I mean, that's what you're good at. That's often what's energizing to you, that fills your cup. And so, yeah, but continuing, like Sean mentioned, let's get the office in the field on the same page. Let's build that respect, because Warfel couldn't function with one or the other. Brubacher couldn't either.
We had a certain times we have an interesting where there's a gap between a superintendent going to jobs, which I'm sure Brubacher has very similar. So we'll bring them into the office and put them in the estimating department. And by the end, they can't wait to get back in the field. They're like, this is like so quiet. Like you're all on your computers. Like, and we feel like it's even allowed for an estimating department where we're at. I think again, it gives them the respect to say like, hey, you're very, very good at what you do, and we are good at what we do. And it's nice for them to see. And then we send our estimators out to actually install doors, put casework in, because when they're putting together the number, and they say, oh, it's 8 hours to put a door or 6 hours to do this or whatever it is. Now they actually know what that, like, hey, you got to take the door out, go all the way upstairs. You got to shake it out. You got to put it in. Is it CMU? Is it stud walls? Is it wood? They're all different. And so now they're starting to understand that piece. And I think you have to do active things to make sure they respect each other. But at the end of the day, they have to understand too that, as a company, we are one company that's all moving forward, and there's a piece and part of every single one that makes a building go, or makes, a site work package complete, and you can't do one without the other.
Yeah, I think that's huge for everybody to understand, is that no matter how much we think that, obviously, if you're in the office, like me being in the office, I know that I couldn't go out into the field and do what they do every day. And I have that level of respect for them because of that, because I know that what we're doing is completely different, but they impact each other so drastically because you can't do one without the other, no matter how you put it. So going off of that, how do you know when someone is the right candidate for the job?
I think that's a really good question. And I would back that up and say you need to know what it is and who it is that you're looking for. I recently had somebody come to me and they wanted my help because they had 2 strong finalist candidates. And in terms of experiences, it was very even. One brought this extra kind of bonus item to the table. The other one brought a different extra kind of bonus item to the table. And so this individual was stuck. Who do I hire? And he was all focused on the experiences piece. I'm like, you need to back up and look at the characteristics piece. And once you can start to evaluate that can help you then make that final decision. So to answer your question, I think you need to back up and make sure you know not only what it is that you're setting out to hire in terms of skills and experiences, but who in terms of those characteristics we keep talking about.
I would say the right candidate is always an interesting phrase for me, is because I think there's 1,000 paths to the right answer. So I don't think there's a right candidate. There is a candidate fits with your team maybe a little bit better, or a candidate that your skill set as a leader could probably offset some of their deficiencies. And so when you look at a job description and you say an estimator and you build it in a perfect model, or a pre-con manager or whatever it is, has all these things. Well, if they check off all those boxes and there's one thing that you're like, I'm not sure I can train or teach that, or I'm qualified or have the time or anything. So where I think about the right candidate is, it's really when it comes down to somebody looking to join the team, is do we have a team that can support them as well? So it's not just whether or not they can fill the role, but do we have the things necessary within the department to make that individual successful, regardless of their skill sets? And we've gone away that probably from an experience standpoint. I mean, we had an estimator who was a bartender and was really good with numbers. You wouldn't naturally think that, but they were really fast with numbers because they had to do it on the fly. And there were things that, we had someone else who had 10 plus years experience, but didn't look like they fit with the team very well. And so we hired the bartender and had a 9-year career with us that was really successful because we had the skill sets to supplement the things that they didn't know. So right candidate for me is always an interesting thing to say, hey, it's both of those candidates probably would have been successful or could have been successful in that. And it's, what do you have to help either one of those? And if you have a better situation for one or the other, that's in the end who I'll usually pick.
Yeah, I like that. We have a phrase that we use to describe that, and that's just making sure you're going in with your eyes wide open. And hiring, I mean, it's an art and a science, and sometimes you get it wrong. And so when you get it wrong, if you feel like you can't develop that person, then rip off the Band-Aid.
I was gonna say fail fast.
Yeah, fail fast.
That's
Yeah.
for both of you.
Mhm.
You know,
Right,
come
correct.
in and if they're the right culture, we've sometimes said, hey, I think you're going to be much better in operations than you are down here, and vice versa. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be a lot happier and probably stay with your organization a lot longer if you're able to say this is not working. And I think you and I both can agree on that.
I think Brubacher does that really well. Look at somebody and say, would you fit better over here? Right? You have a number of examples.
We definitely tried to do that before we, part ways, is just trying to figure out, is it something within a crew that's in a field or within an office? Is it just a different department that they put their skill set, or we talk even about disc profiles. It's something that their disc profile just fits better in a different role, something like that.
Yeah. Something I think both organizations do too is, I'm going to use another Lencioni phrase, but he often talks about the idea of people who weigh into a conversation are more likely to buy into the results. And when you're including other people in that interview process, you have to be clear who has veto power and who doesn't. But just by including them, whether it's on the front side, hey, who do you think we need to hire? How would you describe the characteristics we need, the skills, the experiences? Maybe it's including them, like Sean talked about, in the interview process. But when you have those voices weighing into the conversation, the hope is that they'll buy in, quote unquote, to the results and help that new hire be successful. Both these organizations, I think, do that really, really well.
I think you mentioned in the interview process. I think the interview process really is important with hiring. Obviously, of course it is, but knowing what questions to ask the person, I think is super duper important. And companies being open to ask new questions. Don't just stick to the same thing all the time. I mean, it's different, obviously, for different positions, but really truly listening to people's responses. There's definitely certain things that I've learned to listen for that I didn't know months ago when I first started, thanks to help to the rest of the HR team. But definitely I would have to say, like, for example, we ask a safety question, and depending on how they respond, well, if you're not a safe person, or however you handle that situation out in the field, I don't want you on our team. Like, I'm not, we have no room for unsafe people. So just an example, but I think questions during the interview process really helps determine if that person's right or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to fit in with the core values, that you're asking those questions that, like you said, not just the status quo, what's your experience?
Correct. Yeah.
Giving hypotheticals and having them say what would I do in that situation, and explain is really important.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to tune in to part 2 on Tuesday, February 20th.
Thanks for listening to the Brubacher podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our podcast so you can listen to the new episodes each month. Share it with your friends in the industry and those who might like to learn more about the construction industry. Feel free to check out our website at www.brubacher.net. I'm Keith Brubacher, president of Brubacher Excavating Incorporated, and we hope you found our discussion insightful, and we look forward to the next time together.